Hello friends, welcome to my channel. Today is the day 14 for our PCNSA series. So in this video, we are going to learn about layer 3 type of interface in Palo Alto firewall. I've already covered about layer 2. If you have not watched, I will recommend you to please watch it. I will provide in the I button or you can check the description box of this particular video as well. Okay, so in this video we are going to learn or understand what is layer 3 interface, how does a virtual router works in Palo Alto firewall, how can we configure the layer 3 interface, what are the parameters that is available, and also how can we configure a virtual router. That we are going to understand with the lab. So I'll highly recommend you to please watch this video till the end because it is very much helpful when you are in hosting environment or if you are going in for an interview as well. So they might ask you about layer 3 and virtual router as well. Okay. And also I'll request you to please subscribe my channel and hit the bell icon so that you never miss any video from me. So without any further delay, let's get started. So friends, first of all, we'll understand what is layer 3 interface, right? With the help of this particular diagram, we'll try to understand. So when we say layer 3 interface, if I compare vWire interface or TAP interface or layer 2 interface, we cannot assign an IP address to all this type of interface. But in layer 3, we can assign an IP address to an interface, right? As you can see in this particular diagram, we have assigned an IP address, right? And also this IP address, whenever we assign an IP address, we'll be able to communicate each other with this particular IP addresses, right? So let's say for an example, if I want to reach from one IP to another IP address, or let's say from one network to another network, we need some kind of routing. So if you have a layer 3 device, you can do routing. So routing have two types. One is static and another is dynamic, right? So static and dynamic both will be supported by layer 3. So what I'm trying to say, in the switches, if you see in switches, we cannot run routing protocol because they cannot understand this IP address. But in same routers which can understand layer 3, you can run routing protocol, you can run static, and you can do dynamic routing as well. So same way, when you make the interface, when you configure the Palo Alto firewall interface as layer 3, you can assign an IP address as well as you can do routing as well. So routing from one network to another network, right? So friends, let's understand what is virtual router. With the help of this diagram, we'll try to understand, and I have taken this particular diagram from my lab itself. Okay, so if I'm explaining the routing virtual router, it will be easier for you to understand from the lab perspective, right? So I've taken this. Now, as the name suggests itself, router, which does routing. So we have configured the Palo Alto interface in a L3 mode which supports IP address and routing. Let's understand how a routing table works basically. Okay, so let's say for an example, this HR initiates a traffic and wanted to send that particular traffic to internet. So the traffic reaches to Palo Alto. Okay, now Palo Alto looks the table, which is routing table basically, okay, and decides as per the destination where this HR wants to go, whether he wants to go to Ethernet 1, Ethernet 1/4 or Ethernet 1/3. So by checking the routing table, he decides that where to send the traffic. Now he checked the routing table and he decided that I need to send the traffic towards internet, right? Now what I can do in this, I will segregate this. Okay, so I'll be creating a table for 1/1 and 1/3, 1/2 and 1/4. So how exactly it works? Like I have a table for, or I can say routing table for 1/2 and 1/4, and I have a different routing table, so RT, for 1/1 and 1/3. Okay, so whenever 1/1 sends a traffic, it checks this routing table. When 1/2 sends a traffic, or HR sends a traffic, it looks this routing table, right? So I am creating two table inside one firewall. So that is the reason it is called as virtual router. I am creating a virtual routing table so that my routing tables will be separated. Now why we should separate this particular routing table is because if we have different customers, or if I want to segregate the traffic between one segment to another segment, let's say for an example, I can say this routing table is dedicated for one of my partner ABC, and this routing table is basically dedicated for XYZ partner. So I want to separate the traffic between my partners, so I can create different routing table for that. Okay, so this function or this feature is also available in Palo Alto firewall. Maybe you can compare this with VRF, which has a different virtual routing forwarding tables, right? So you can compare that, but it is not exactly, but it is similar like kind of thing. Okay, friends, now we'll understand how we can configure layer 3 interface in Palo Alto firewall. What are the options, what are the parameters that is available in layer 3, as well as we are going to see how can we configure virtual router, how can we create multiple routing tables, which we are going to see in the lab. So let's jump into the lab. We are going to follow the same lab what I have showed you guys. Okay, I'll be following the same lab. Okay, and the target of this particular lab will be Ethernet 1 and Ethernet 1/3 will be in one virtual router 1. Okay, and 1/2 and 1/4 will be in virtual router 2. So maybe in upcoming video, let's say for example, if you are watching this particular video, take a screenshot and keep this screenshot so that you can remember what I'm configuring it. Okay, so let's move on to the Palo Alto configuration, right? Friends, let's get started with Palo Alto configuration. So we are going to configure the first interface. Okay, and I'll be explaining you about the parameters of this interface, like when we configure layer 3, what are the parameters that we can get, and what are those configuration that we can do. Okay, then we are moving to VR configuration, like virtual router configuration. Okay, first we'll complete the interface configuration, then we'll move on to VR. Now this is the dashboard of Palo Alto firewall. We'll go to the network, and this is the interface that we are having. You can see interface 1 and 2, 3 and 4, like 4 interfaces that we are using, right? Now to complete the interface configuration, we have to create zone configuration. Without zone configuration, interface configuration is basically incomplete. So I'm just creating an inside interface, inside zone, which is layer 3, right? And I'm creating it. Now we'll go to the interface Ethernet 1/1, which is connected to IT, as you can see. Okay, let's configure this interface. After that, you can put the comment, and then you have option to make it layer 3. Now once you made it layer 3, you have a lot of option to configure, right? Now the main thing over here that we are going to deal with is virtual router and security zone. So by default, there is a virtual router which is known as default, which is actually considered as a global table or global routing table, right? So we'll select this particular virtual router, and then we can have the security zone that you can see, which is inside that we have created just now. Okay. And we have option to configure IPv4 address. Okay. We can configure static, we can configure PPOE, we can configure DSCP. So we have IP address. I will be assigning an IP address. So in this particular network, basically it's a broadcast domain, because layer 3, when we configure an interface, it becomes a layer 3 or broadcast domain. So we'll be assigning an IP address here. So let's configure an IP address, which is 192.168.10.10/24. So I've taken one of the IP address from that particular subnet and I've assigned to this. Okay. Now we have IPv6. IPv6, we are not configuring any IPv6 IP address, so I'm not going to touch this. Even SD-WAN configuration, we are not configuring SD-WAN over here, so we'll skip this as well. We'll go to advanced. In advanced, we have we can set the link speed, we can set the link duplex, half duplex, full duplex, or we can make it down or up. Like if you want to bounce the port, so you can make it down and up like that. So right now it is auto because it'll go for a negotiation and then it'll go up. We have something called as management profile. So management profile, by default, interface, through management interface, we log into the devices. Okay. Now let's say if you want to log in from this particular interface, then you create a management profile. Okay. In the management profile, you will say that I want to allow SSH through this particular interface. I want to allow telnet. I want to allow HTTPS. So you can basically create a management profile and you can basically assign those protocols, allow those protocols, so that from this particular interface, anyone can log into Palo Alto firewall, right? After that, you have MTU value. You can adjust TCP MSS value as well. You can do that. After that, you have ARP entry. So specifically, you can assign some IP address with the MAC address that needs to always be there in the ARP table for Palo Alto firewall. Basically, this will be created once we do the NAT. Okay. Or I don't think right now I'm not able to recall any other features which basically when we create a ARP entry, any other benefits that we'll be getting it, right? Now we have ND entries. It is for IPv6, NDP proxies as well for IPv6. LLDP is for discovery. Let's say for an example, if how in Cisco we have something called as CDP, neighbors, like that we have something called as LLDP, which is it is an open source CDP. Okay, Cisco Discovery Protocol, right? This is Cisco proprietary and this is open source. So let's say if you want to see which is my connected device, you can turn on LLDP in this particular device and in this particular device, and they will do some negotiation in the LDP and they will recognize each other what are the device they are having, right? So you can turn on LLDP as well if you want. Then you have DDNS, which I am going to cover in DNS security. I'm not going to touch right now. Okay, so these are the options that you are having once you configure layer 3 interface in Palo Alto firewall. So what we did, we just configured the IP address and we configured the security zone, and we are going to see how we can configure virtual router. Okay, so we have seen the parameters of Ethernet 1/1. So friends, let's configure virtual router here. So let's move on to virtual router. You can see virtual router only one, which is default. And right now we have assigned Ethernet 1/1 to this particular virtual router. assigning the interface to the virtual router is meaning that he will be checking that particular routing table. He'll not be able to, he's not going to check any other routing table. So let's move on and let's create VR1. I'll just changing the name. So I'll just make it VR1. Okay. I'll be creating another virtual router, which is VR2. Fine. So let's create this. And we will be assign those interfaces to according to that virtual one. What we have decided, 1 and 3 in virtual 1 and 1, 2 and 4 in VR2, right? So let's configure that. So quickly I'll be configuring this one. So let's VR1 and security zone. I'll be creating a security zone. So this will be outside because it is connected to internet. So I'll just create it IPv4 because we have a DHCP in my network. So I'll just create it as a DHCP. Then we have Ethernet 1/2. I'll make it as layer 3 and virtual router 2. I'll be creating another zone, which is, let's say for an example, LAN 2, or I'll just create LAN 1. Okay. Something like this. IPv4. So this will be 20.0. Okay. So I'll just configure 192.168.20.10/24. Fine. I will do the configuration for 1/4 as well. I'll make it layer 3. Okay. And virtual router VR2. I'll be creating another zone, which is LAN 2, right? And IPv4 192.168.30.10/24. Fine. So we can assign VR1, VR2, VR1, VR2. So 1 and 3, 2 and 4, right? So first let's commit this and we'll do some routing changes over there. So let's commit this. So I'll just stop the video for a while it is committing, and then we'll start the video again. So friends, before I show you the routing table, let me show you one important information. So as you can see that I have got the IP address from the DHCP server, which is for our internet one, right? Now if you click on this and if you go to IPv4, what it says, automatically creates a default routing pointing to default gateway provided by the server. So what exactly this means is, let's say for an example, we have a DHCP server. Okay. Now DHCP server has provided me IP address and default gateway. So what Palo Alto will be doing it, he will be creating a default route, which is 0.0.0.0/0 pointing to this particular gateway. So what is the gateway right now? Let me show you guys. So if I go and I'll see the gateway is 170. So there will be a default gateway pointing to 254. Let me show you guys. Okay. So let me delete this and I'll go to virtual router, and in which VR he is in, it's in VR1. Okay. So let me check the routing table for VR1, where we can go, we can just click on this runtime stats, right? You can see a default routing pointing to 254, right? Now you can see this routing table. Do you see 20 or 30 in this? No, right? You can see 10, you can see 172.29, right? But if you go to VR2 routing table, you will be seeing only 20 and 30, right? So your routing table is not allowing you, or it is not allowing you to see the other IP or other subnet, right? So here you can see only the routing table which is assigned to this particular VR, right? So this is how the routing, the virtual router works here. If we create a policy as well, we'll not be able to communicate, because router will say I don't have any routes as well. So for an example, let's say I create a routing from this going to internet. Okay, so let's create that. So I'm going from LAN 2 or LAN 1, right? LAN 1 to internet, right? So I'll be choosing LAN 1. The destination is in outside. Okay, everything is allowed. Okay, and also I'll be creating a NAT entry as well, because I want to go to internet. So I'm going from LAN to outside, or I can say internet. So I'll just choose that particularly LAN 1, and I'm going to outside. Translated. So dynamic IP address, interface, and I'll be going 1/3. I'll tell you why it is showing as none. Okay, so in upcoming videos I'll be showing you guys. Okay, so let me just configure. Okay, it is not connecting, so I'll just restart this PC. Okay, so I'll just stop the video. Let's configure the IP address over here. So let me try that IP address, change this. Okay, so let's put the properties over here. Okay, so let's put the IP address 192. Okay, let me close and reopen it again. So it is 192.168.20.5, 192.168.20.10. okay, my default gateway is 20.10 because in my gateway is there, so we have configured 20.10, right? You can see in the network, you come to the interface 20.10, right? So let's configure this. We have routes also available. Let's try to access the internet and let's see it is working or not. Okay, so let's open Firefox, and also we'll see in the policies, monitor whether we are getting any traffic or not. Okay, so let's try this. Google.com server not found. Okay, now if you see this, you are not seeing the logs as well. If you go to traffic logs, because you don't have any routes available here. Okay, we are gonna start it again. Log into the CLI and we'll check what is the status, why the traffic is not getting forwarded. So let's go to show counter global back filter packet filter, yes, delta, yes, right? Now you can see most of the traffics are basically dropped due to no destination zone forwarding. So due to routing table, now if I try to access it again and again, or let's say I try to access YouTube, let's say try to access Wikipedia, okay, my counter is basically, now every time I can see only this counter to be here. Okay, so basically the drop reasons are basically due to no destination zone found, right? So this basically says that in the routing table we don't have any routes to forward that particular traffic. But if I include the zone which is in there, so basically instead of this, if I put inside this one and in security zone, it's loading now. And if I click on this, if I want to edit, and in the source if I just include inside, okay, and if I commit this, while it is committing, let's go to this particular PC, okay, and let's configure the IP address. Let's see whether it is configured or not. So let's enlarge this, or I'll just open it again. So let's check whether we have proper IP address configured or not. So it is 10.5 10.10, okay, which is properly configured here, okay. Now if I try to access any of the website, let's see whether it is accessible or not, okay. So I've just click on Firefox to open. Meanwhile, we'll see whether the commit has been completed or not. So we'll just wait for commit to be completed, okay, because I have added the VR1 here and VR1 here as well, which is in same routing table. So if you can see in the network, the virtual routers, okay, so in the VR1, which is having a default route, and Ethernet 1 and 3 is there. So we are testing on virtual router 1, which is Ethernet 1. So let's open this and we'll try to access Google, or let's say facebook.com itself, okay. Now you can see. So with the help of VRs, we can basically separate the routing table, and we can separate these things. So let's, okay, so with the help of layer 3, we can assign the IP address. We have few parameters to configure, which will be helpful for us as well. And we can basically separate the virtual routers, which is basically a routing table. We are having a separate routing table. We can maintain the separate routing table by creating multiple VRs inside Palo Alto firewall. Now, how many VRs that we can create? Because it depends on the model of the device and the licenses of the device as well. You can check out the datasheet for that, okay. So this is what I wanted to cover in this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching this video till the end. Thank you so much. And also I'll request you to please subscribe my channel and hit the bell icon so that you never miss any video from me, okay. If you have any suggestion related to my video, you can write to me through emails, through instant message, in Instagram, Facebook, wherever you want to reach. All the social media handles are there in my about section. And thank you so much. I'll see you in the next.